Good evening, everyone. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and I'm just going to give my opinion regarding all of the recent bills that have either passed or failed to pass through the Senate, and essentially what I think the ramifications of them are. Now, I'm going to start with the recent passage of the tax cut extensions. In truth, they're not tax cuts, they're simply extensions of existing tax rates. I got into this on a previous video, and I'm just going to sum up my point by saying this. I opposed the tax bill for a couple of reasons. Number one, it reinstituted the grave robbers tax, aka the death tax or the inheritance tax, which I think is a wholly invasive and unnecessary tax that affects a lot more people than you might think. And on top of that, it was merely a 2-year extension. It didn't bring any lasting stability to the tax code, so it will do nothing except for temporarily stave off any further deterioration of in some senses of the economy. Granted, other legislation that was enacted by this presidency has already done enough damage that we're going to see lasting distortions in the marketplace for the years to come. But on this front, thankfully, there is going to be a little bit less direct taxation on the earnings of individuals in this country. Now, with regards to the notion that these are supposedly tax cuts for the rich, there's no such thing as a tax cut for the poor or a tax cut for the middle class in this country. Our entire tax code is designed specifically to prevent and to stymie upward mobility. There is no way for us to move up out of the current bracket that we're in unless we are extremely savvy at navigating through the endless spider web that is the American tax code. And we always run the risk of being caught in the snares of that dreadful spider, which is the IRS, in the process whenever we try to move up in the world. So long story short, if you're poor and you're being subject to the graduated income tax, it is a safe bet that you're going to remain poor, and thus your situation does not improve. If you are middle class, you will be a persecuted person for most of your life, and you will be hated by those beneath you and those above you. And for those who already have everything, this matters not, because those people can afford to pay the proper people in order to make sure that their nest eggs are well maintained, in spite of all of the various laws that we have preventing those beneath them from moving up to equal level with them. So, long story short, the tax extensions, not particularly impressed with them. I would have voted against it if it had been my call, but obviously it wasn't. But it's not really going to hurt anything, but it's definitely not going to help anything. The defeat of the omnibus bill. That was probably the most positive step that we've taken. It is an actual assertion that we want at least some level of fiscal sanity. Now, how far groups like the Tea Party are actually willing to go on this are yet to be seen. But if they continue on this particular issue and they push for actual fiscal sanity, which includes cuts in spending, they will receive my blessing. Now, they will receive a small and measured blessing, provided that they do not take on the issue of foreign policy in a more direct manner the way that Ron Paul would have them do, in which case they will receive my full blessing, because if we're going to achieve fiscal sanity, then we have to look at foreign policy and we have to look at inefficiencies in military spending. It's just as simple as that. Now, with regards to the DREAM Act, good riddance to bad rubbish. I've actually attached in the description a link to a New York Times article that deals with this. It's titled "Senate Blocks Bill for Young Illegal Immigrants." Well, thankfully, they're at least calling them illegal immigrants rather than undocumented workers. And I'll read you a few sections of this bill. The vote by 55 to 41 in favor of the bill, which is known as the DREAM Act, effectively kills it for this year, and its fate is uncertain. The measure needed the support of 60 senators to cut off a filibuster and bring it to the floor. Supporters said they were heartened that the measure won the backing of a majority of the Senate. They said they would continue to press for it, either on its own or as part of a wide immigration overhaul that some Democrats hope to undertake next year and believe could be an area of cooperation with Republicans who will control a majority in the House. Most immediately, the measure would have helped grant legal status to hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants, students, and recent graduates whose lives are severely restricted, though many have lived in the United States for nearly their entire lives. Young Hispanic men and women filled the spectator galleries of the Senate, many of them wearing graduation caps and tassels in a symbol of their support for the bill. They held hands in a prayerful gesture as the clerk called the roll, and many looked stricken as the defeat was announced. President Obama had personally lobbied lawmakers in support of the bill, but Democrats were not able to hold ranks. And we have a listing of 5 Democrats that opposed this, including Senator Max Baucus of Montana, Kay Hagan of North Carolina, Ben Nelson, Nebraska, Mark Pryor of Arkansas, and John Tester of Montana. All of these are obviously senators that do not come from the Harvard alumni or from the left coast, unsurprisingly. And 3 Republicans joined the rank of Democrats in favor of it. Robert Bennett, the bitter Mormon from Utah, spew. Lisa Murkowski, the bitter excommunicated Republican who won a very contentious re-election just barely against a Tea Party opponent. In my opinion, Lisa Murkowski is a useless puke, and it's unfortunate that she wasn't gotten rid of, but oh well, you can't win them all. And Richard Lugar of Indiana, somebody who, in my estimation, should also be removed from the Senate as soon as possible, and not just because of this vote. The guy's a useless moderate. And anyway, Obama made a statement calling the outcome incredibly disappointing. I'm just going to cease and desist from reading the rest of this article and just say this. We live in a time where federal spending is at a level of unsustainability. And this is going to play in a little bit to my opinion regarding the fourth and final of these bills, being the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal. We are essentially at a point right now where we are just barely cutting it in terms of replacement fertility, which means that enough of us are still having enough children to maintain and expand the current population, but the number is dwindling, and eventually we're going to come to the sad state that Western Europe is in now, where we're not going to be having enough children in order to maintain ourselves, and we are going to have to rely on outside help in order to maintain our economy, because if you don't have people, you don't have prosperity. Where does prosperity come from if it does not come from the hand which molds it? And if we have fewer hands, we have a slower amount of growth. We may have no growth at all. We may have stagnation, and we may even have backsliding in the economic sense. It is very difficult for me to stomach the idea of having to rely on unassimilated people in order to maintain this country, and that's precisely what this law would seek to do. And it would basically further legitimize the idea that the current populace of America should not be in a position to sustain itself through its own children and have jobs for its own citizens, and thus we will continue in the march towards a global world government by virtue of necessity, because we'll become so interdependent upon each other that we will have no use for national sovereignty anymore. That's exactly what this DREAM Act bill struck at. It struck at the very heart of American nationalism. And I still maintain enough nationalism to say that I don't want this. I am a man of very little faith when it comes to the nationalistic tendencies of this country. I think this country is dying a very slow death, but while I'm here, I might as well fight on behalf of it. So I'm hence here saying what I'm saying on this issue. So thankfully the DREAM Act was not passed. However, the fact that it got a majority approval in the Senate is extremely disheartening, and there needs to be a shakeup in the Senate during the next election, and hopefully there will be, because the current natural-grown citizenry of this country is in dire need of reasserting themselves. And via the Tea Party and other liberty-based groups, they might yet be able to accomplish this. And now, moving on to the issue of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell bill. I have a very different perspective on this than most other people that are confessing Christians and associated with the so-called Christian right. To me, I have a very neutral stance on this thing. For most Christians, the idea of homosexuals serving in the military is something that is revolting, and they don't want to have to deal with it at all. My argument would be is nothing really changed here except for the fact that now gays can serve openly rather than sneaking around and still serving. Furthermore, as a believer in the concept of habeas corpus, I am very much opposed to the idea of digging around in a person's private life in order to find ways in which to condemn them. And Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to a large extent, legitimized this practice. People in the upper echelons of the military would do background checks. They would read through emails and do other things in order to discredit and dishonorably discharge people who have served openly in the military. And this is an extremely disingenuous thing to do, but it is something that is nonetheless being done. Now, from my standpoint, it's very simple. A person should not be out advertising his sexuality for the whole world to see, especially when he's on the job. And the truth is that when you are a public servant, you are held to a very different standard than if you're a private citizen in your own home, engaging in your own pursuit of happiness. And so I'm not really enthusiastic about the idea of people going around saying, "Woohoo! Oh yes, I'm gay and I'm in the military." That I find that obnoxious. But at the same time, really, from a realistic standpoint, if the military is going to have gay people in the military, they might as well be open about it. Don't sneak around about this stuff. And for all of you that are up in arms saying that this is the end of the military as you know it, I want to ask all of you something, you confessing Christians. Have you actually read the Bible, and have you actually looked at the prohibitions that are still in effect for all of you? Every time you put on a condom and go to bed with your wife and you refuse to procreate, but you still engage in copulation, you are engaging in sin, and you are also engaging in idolatry. So in essence, there's not much difference between you and the supposed reprobate homosexuals that you dislike so much for not helping to replenish the population. And by the same token, every time that you look at another woman other than your wife with lustful thoughts, again, you're sinning and you're committing idolatry. So take care to do as Christ said, and remove the beam from your eye before you go around trying to pluck out the mote from the eyes of others. But if you have done this, and you have real legitimate concerns about this, that's fine by me. But if you're going to be consistent about this, and if you want to approach this the right way, which is the way I approach this, there's limits to how much you can actually participate in this government, because this government is not a Christian government. It never was from the get-go. The fact that they have convinced Christians to participate in it is a detriment to Christianity as far as I see it. This is not a Christian government. The Constitution does not confess Christ as the Messiah, the Savior of mankind, and as the mediator between God and the elect. So as far as I'm concerned, de facto, it's not a Christian constitution, hence it's not a Christian government. And if that's the case, then our obligations to that government are limited to whatever we are obligated to do in order to maintain civil society. I don't plan on ever running for office in the federal government. I usually tend not to send money to candidates unless they're a very specific kind of candidate who will lessen the stress in my life via federal encroachment. And essentially, I take the road of prudence, which is the road that every Christian is afforded to take, provided that they don't violate the tenets of Christianity. So, long story short, I've got mixed feelings about the whole thing. Take from it what you will. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.